We're about to have multiple showcases for big Sony games. Sony just announced some PS5 price cuts. Now's your best chance to save on PlayStation Plus. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to PSReady. The Game Awards are over. We are approaching the end of the year and things are actually looking really positive for PlayStation. So about this time last year, we had heard from Sony that PS5s were going to be more available than they were in 2020, which I guess if you look at the numbers, like the raw numbers of PS5s that they put out, you could get a PS5 easier than in 2020, but overall, it was still extremely difficult to get a PlayStation 5. Now it's kind of interesting because this year Sony's saying the same stuff, but it actually seems like they're telling the truth, because last week when we talked about this, a lot of people were in the comments saying that, yeah, just like me, I saw a PS5 at Target when I went to pick up my InZone headset. Other people have been seeing them all over the place in stores, which is kind of crazy because initially when the PS5 came out, if you guys remember, you couldn't buy the thing in store. You had to basically order it for store pickup. There was like no actual option to actually go find one in a store. The Xbox Series X, on the other hand, that ended up on store shelves a little bit quicker, and it really seemed like Microsoft was just flexing their big money to like make it so that they could get more Xboxes than PS5s produced. But now we're at the end of 2022 and it looks like we can finally get a PS5, and it's resulting in some better sales for Sony, like to the point where sales are almost up 50% from where they were last November. I think the number is like 45, but that's close enough to 50, which regardless is a big number increase of how many PS5s are available. And this kind of ties into what we talked about last week, where Horizon Forbidden West's new DLC is not coming to the PS4. And I think the big reason for that is Sony is finally confident in the number of PS5s that are actually out there where they can make money on this DLC. Like, yes, they are still leaving money on the table potentially by not releasing this DLC for PlayStation 4, but that's the game you've got to play when you have a brand new console out there. And it's kind of crazy because I remember back in the day when the Xbox 360 came out, right? I had an Xbox original. I was so excited about it. And then that winter, there were some games for 360 and some games for Xbox. And that's when I realized that the cross-generation thing was going to end very quickly. Now, when the PS4 came out, it was a very similar story. There were a few PS3 games that came out after the PS4, like Dark Souls 2 is one example I can remember, where I had to keep my PS5 plugged in for like 6 more months. But really, the crossover was very quick. And then skip ahead to the PS4 to the PS5, it's taken around 2 full years to start seeing some exclusive next-gen games that actually take advantage of the console. Not stuff like Gotham Knights, which is just kind of like a buggy mess, right? So yeah, if you've been waiting to get a PS5, I feel like now is the best time to do it because you can actually get one and there's a lot of great games coming out for it. I'm at the end of the Callisto Protocol. I'm literally on the last boss. I got to him at like 2 in the morning last night and I was so pissed because I tried it like 30 times and it's a huge difficulty spike, but I know I can do it. It just had to be one of those situations where you go to bed and then you come back the next day and beat it on the first try. I've got a feeling that's exactly what's going to happen. I need 2 more trophies in this game. One of them is getting all the audio logs. I missed one and it's kind of frustrating because they don't have a chapter select, so you have to rely on saves. But then I saw a PSA online that you can actually just jump back into a save right before the final boss and set the difficulty to maximum security. And if you beat that final boss, you get the trophy, which, like, yeah, this is a very easy platinum. I think honestly the hardest trophy of the entire game was getting the 5 perfect dodges, because you have to do it in a sequence, right? Like if you're at a checkpoint, you can't do 3, then die, then get it again. You got to get like 5 in one single life technically, or like 5 in one long sequence. You can't like do 3 and reload. This next story is burning my soul a little bit because I missed it by like a day and it's super frustrating. There's a catch here you'll see in a second. So right now, if you're a new user or a lapsed user of PlayStation Plus, you can get Essential for either £30 or $30 in the United States, and that's an entire year. So it's literally half off. And why this is so frustrating to me is that, again, as I said, I just missed this deal. So the new Destiny season just started, season 19. I played through the intro mission on my PS5, and then I went to do a Vanguard strike, and it was like, hey, your PS Plus just expired. You got to buy a month to play this. And I was like, all right, I'll buy a month of PS Plus and wait for a deal around Christmas to get a full year, right? So I bought that month, and then 2 days later, this sale starts, and I could have gotten a whole year for $30. And I guarantee you that on January 10th or 11th, or whenever my month that I bought lapsed, this deal won't be around anymore. anymore. So if you have a lapsed PlayStation Plus subscription, or you're a new user who hasn't really been trying out the online features, definitely get this $30 deal, because you'll still probably save money if you get this $30 deal and then upgrade eventually to PS Plus Extra. But right now you can also get a year of PS Plus Extra for $70, which is a pretty decent discount. And you can get a year of premium for $90, which I would not buy that. They finally have a PSP game coming. It leaked early like all the other ones did. It's Battlefront 2 for PSP, which, not gonna lie, one of my most played PSP games, but they also have the PS2 version of Battlefront 2 on there. And I'm pretty sure Extra's library has the like Battlefront 2 from a few years ago. So you have a lot of better options. At least you're getting PSP games, but regardless, I would buy PS Plus Extra. I think I'm gonna pick up a year of it because I'm sick of paying for these 1-month subscriptions. It's kind of crazy that 2023 is literally days away at this point. I do not like how fast 2022 went, but we have some awesome stuff in literally the first 3 months of the year to look forward to. In January, we're getting the DualSense Edge, which, you know, this is a little front loaded for me. I'm a controller guy. I love hardware. I'm super excited for the DualSense Edge. And then in February, we have the PSVR 2 on top of a bunch of games coming out around the same time. So the first half, at least, of 2023 looks like it's finally going to be the official launch period of the PlayStation 5 and all of its power. If you didn't know, the PSVR 2 is up for pre-order right now. Of course, it is really expensive. It's $50 more than the most expensive PS5, which is kind of crazy. But if you wanted to get one, you had to do it with an invitation system up until now. So I actually got my invitation. We had one pre-ordered before that, so I didn't have to use it. But now you can just go to the PlayStation Direct store and pre-order a PlayStation VR 2. And I'm really curious how excited people are for this thing. Sony is putting a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money into this system because they have millions of them ready to go for launch. They do have a big game at launch, which I think looks really cool. Obviously, Horizon Call of the Mountain, and they're porting up a ton of games from the PSVR 1. The biggest controversy that I really don't like about this thing is that there's no upgrade path for a lot of games, because if you guys didn't hear, there's no like PS5 upgrades for these VR games. Like games that worked with PSVR 1 do not work with PSVR 2. And with certain games, if they are porting them to PSVR 2, they're not giving you an upgrade path. They're saying, sorry, you gotta rebuy the game because of the work we had to do to rebuild this game. And to be fair to the developers, it is different like completely across the board. The way the PSVR 1 works is it uses the camera to track light balls that are on the PS Move controllers, and it's just completely different across the board with the PSVR 2. The actual headset itself has cameras. It's tracking the room around you and also the sensors inside the controllers that you're holding in your hands. But still, I think if you bought these games for full price, like the very few users out there who did, because the PSVR 1 didn't sell incredibly well, I feel like there should be an upgrade path for those people. But if you're a user like me who maybe had an Oculus Quest and an Oculus Quest 2 and you're jumping into the PSVR ecosystem fresh, you're not gonna really worry about this too much because you're gonna have to buy the games fresh anyway. This is just kind of funny to me because I remember doing a PSReady video maybe like a year and a half ago where Sony did a free PSVR bundle. It was during their stay-at-home initiative that they were doing for a couple years, and they gave everyone some of the best games on PSVR. And I remember I literally said, man, this is gonna be cool to have these games in my account for when the PSVR 2 comes out. Here we are, the PSVR 2 is coming out and I cannot play any of those games I added to my account. So they're just clogging up my PSN download list for nothing. There's definitely something going on at Insomniac related to Spider-Man 2. It all started this weekend when we got a tweet from someone who's higher up there that was just the gif from the trailer where you see Spider-Man and Miles Morales next to each other and they're looking into the alleyway where we first see Venom revealed, voiced by none other than Tony Todd, the Candyman himself. Now this is like the classic hype tweet, you know, it's someone higher up at the studio tweeting just a gif that we haven't seen in a while. Like they haven't really said anything about Spider-Man 2 other than that it's coming in 2023. There was also that leak earlier this year that said they showed it to Marvel and they were like way ahead of schedule. So yeah, the timing lines up perfectly. And then you've got to consider that at the time you're watching this video, it might already be out, but we are getting the Across the Spider-Verse trailer this week. And it makes sense to pair up a trailer for Spider-Man 2 with Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse because Miles Morales is featured heavily in both the movie and this new game. And then things got even crazier because Sony went ahead and created a listing for the game on the PlayStation Store store where you can go wish list it right now, which I already did because I'm super excited for the game. And the coolest thing about it is that the logo for this game is the black suit. It's a black background with the white Spider-Man logo. So that kind of gives us some hints about what's going to happen in this game. Obviously, Venom is going to become a villain, but I wouldn't be shocked if the sections where you play as Miles Morales are trying to help Peter overcome the black suit, right? Because as any of us who've seen Spider-Man 3 or read the comics know, the black suit corrupts Spider-Man. It kind of makes him a little more emo, and then he's got to get it off with sound. It's kind of like a cool way to work Miles in and modernize the story, right? Like have Spider-Man help this other Spider-Man get the black suit off, and then it transfers to someone, maybe Harry Osborn, as was teased at the end of the original Spider-Man game, or maybe they're going to introduce Eddie Brock. Who knows? They're doing something different with this universe, obviously, because spoilers, 3, 2, 1, Aunt May dies in the first game, which is freaking crazy. So yeah, as for when this game could come out, I think there's not really too many options. Like the first half of the year is packed. Sony's got Forspoken, which is like kind of an exclusive for the PS5. It's a timed exclusive that no one really seems to care about all that much, but it is taking up a spot in Sony's release schedule. And then in June, we've got Final Fantasy 16, which is sort of a similar situation, except people are actually excited for that game. So that really only leaves the same slot that the original Spider-Man game took up, which is around September, right? I mean, Sony traditionally doesn't release games during the holiday season. If you look at the PS5 launch, that obviously was during the holiday season because they launched the console in November, but normally they like to leave that spot wide open for other publishers, and the latest they really do it is the beginning of November. So just taking all of the games that are coming out next year into account, I feel like September, yeah, is probably when we'll see this game. It would also be great to get some gameplay from The Last of Us Part 1 on PC and Returnal on PC, but regardless, it looks like we are going to close out the year with some cool announcements from Sony. I'm super stoked for Spider-Man. I'm gonna play Miles Morales again just because it's like the best Christmas game ever, other than like Arkham Origins, which if you haven't played that game, it's pretty underrated. But regardless, there could be some news about Spider-Man that already happened by the time you see this video, but if not, it will happen sometime this week. And the last news story I have for you guys today is an update on the whole Activision Xbox thing, which I know everyone is sick of hearing about, but Phil Spencer said something the other day that really is grinding some gears with PlayStation fans. So in the last video, we were talking about how it looked like the FTC was going to sue Microsoft, and they actually ended up doing it like the day after we recorded that video. So at the Game Awards, I'm not gonna lie, Phil Spencer did not look like a very happy camper because, you know, he's getting sued by the FTC. And the craziest thing about that is that it turns out they got sued by the FTC because they misread the ruling from the CMA, where basically they thought the CMA said that Microsoft didn't honor their agreements that they said they would have with Bethesda when they bought that publisher. The FTC thought that Microsoft said that they wouldn't keep games like Starfield and the Elder Scrolls 6 exclusive, or Deathloop, for example, and then they ended up making those games exclusive. But then the CMA came out and said, nah, you guys misread what happened, and that's not what they said at all, so they didn't lie. So there is actually a chance that this could all be nullified before it even gets started, but all the analysts and estimates are saying that this could push the deal well into 2024 if it goes through. But the craziest thing of all is that even with this lawsuit happening, people who are way smarter than me are saying that Microsoft still has a really good shot of this going through. It's just going to take longer, and Microsoft has a good reason to keep pushing for this, because if it doesn't go through, I think they have to give Activision $3 billion, which is crazy. But one thing Phil Spencer said over the weekend is really sticking with people because it's a really easy point to argue. Basically what he said is that the way PlayStation has grown over the years is by making Xbox smaller. And look, I'm like a pretty non-biased PlayStation fan. You know, I play everything. I have an Xbox, I have a PS5, I have a PC. I split most of my time between my Steam Deck and my PlayStation 5, and I'm totally happy with the experience. But I could not disagree more with that statement from Phil Spencer, because I was there during the PS3 era when Sony launched a console for $600 with no games, and third-party games were not coming to that thing at the time. Like, we had to wait a long time to get some of the biggest games just because that cell processor made the console so hard to develop for. But then you know what Sony did to fix that situation besides lowering the price of the PS3? They had all of their first-party studios double down and start releasing banger after banger. Look, I'm not saying games like Lair were all that great, because it wasn't, and And Heavenly Sword wasn't all that awesome either, but then the tide started to turn when we started to get games like Metal Gear Solid 4, Killzone 2, Resistance 2 and 3, Infamous and Infamous 2. Of course, the entire Uncharted trilogy. Like Uncharted 2 alone, I think is the game that really put the PS3 on the map. And it still blows my mind that Sony is allowing that series to kind of chill the way it is, because it's honestly, I don't know, one of my favorite series of all time. I love it so much. And the difference between Sony and Microsoft when it comes to buying studios is like the vast majority of the studios that Sony bought, like Sucker Punch, like Insomniac, etc., 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 were all bought after Sony made a game with them at a second party capacity, right? Like Insomniac is kind of a weird example because Sony has made so many games with Insomniac, ranging from like Ratchet and Clank all the way up to Spider-Man, but they ended up buying Insomniac because they built up the relationship with them where they made awesome second party games that Sony was marketing as exclusives for the console, and then they bought them because they fit into the Sony ecosystem. And this is where the big difference between Sony and Microsoft is, in my opinion. Microsoft is buying studios that have already made really good games. And Microsoft, since they bought these studios, has released some good games like Deathloop, of course, and they're going to release Starfield. But in my opinion, as much as it sucks to say, I don't think Microsoft deserves credit for those games being good because they were mostly developed by the time Microsoft bought Bethesda. And while they're trying to do the same thing with Call of Duty, I would also say look at the games that they're producing in-house, like Fable. That's coming from the studio that made Forza Horizon. And I think those are good games to look at because it shows whether or not Microsoft is actually improving the way it develops games. What Sony does, on the other hand, is they develop games with second-party studios. So they don't own the studios, but they own the IP that the studios are working on. So they hire a studio to make something like, I don't know, Infamous, or they hire a studio to make something like Resistance, and then they work on Ratchet and Clank. And then they foster relationships with these developers and help them make the best games possible and give them the money to make those games great. And it's a beneficial relationship because the games sell really well because they get great review scores. And then when Sony eventually has a good enough relationship with these studios, they purchase them. They're not strong-arming these studios into selling. They're not paying way more than they're worth, driving the price up of other studios. They're being fair about it, and they're only buying them after they create banger games that sell PlayStation 5 consoles. So for Phil Spencer to say that PlayStation has gotten big by making Microsoft small or Xbox small, I really, again, just couldn't disagree more, because the way PlayStation has gotten big from their lowest point where they've ever been, which is the launch of the PS3, is by making great games with great studios.